Hey, well, it's great to be with you this morning. My name is Colton. I'm the Director of Student Ministries here at Prairie Alliance Church. And this morning we're going to be continuing our series, Runway to Resurrection, where we're following along with lectionary, which is simply these predetermined scriptures that the church follows along with. And there's some churches that follow this along with the lectionary every week, every year. We're just doing it for the next few weeks as we lean in to Easter. So it's kind of exciting because this portion of scripture that we're going to look at today, we can know that there's Christians all over the world and there's churches all over the world that are diving into the exact same portion of text that we are, and we're all celebrating the same things and looking to find Jesus in the same piece of the Bible. So that's kind of neat. It's kind of cool to be doing that. So this week, we're going to start with the portion of Scripture that has been assigned, and it is the story of the Transfiguration of Christ in Luke chapter 9, verses 28 to 36. So we're going to read the story to start with, and then we'll reference back to it as we move through this story together. Let's start in verse 28. About 8 days later, Jesus took Peter, John, and James up on a mountain to pray. And as he was praying, the appearance of his face was transformed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared and began talking with Jesus. They were glorious to see, and they were speaking about his exodus from the world, which was about to be fulfilled in Jerusalem. Peter and the others had fallen asleep, and when they woke up, they saw Jesus' glory and the two men standing with him. As Moses and Elijah were starting to leave, Peter, not even knowing what he was saying, blurted out, "Master, it's wonderful for us to be here. Let us make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But even as he was saying this, a cloud overshadowed them, and terror gripped them as the cloud covered them. Then a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." When the voice finished, Jesus was there alone, and they didn't tell anyone at that time what they had seen. Kind of a weird little story. But I think as we dive into this, there's some things that we can learn about faith and doubt and life and Christianity and how it can apply to our lives today. Why don't you pray with me, and then let's dive into this text together. Jesus, I pray that you would help us to see you in this story. I pray through your Holy Spirit that you would open us up to seeing a more full, a deeper revelation of who you are. I pray that you would captivate our hearts, that you would grow us into mature Christians and believers. I pray that you would use us as a community to turn the city upside down. I pray that you would open us up to experiencing you this morning. I pray this in your name. Amen. So a little while ago, I stumbled over this blog of this woman asking for help. And the reason that she was asking for help is she had just recently got married. You see, she was a Christian, and she married a Christian man, but she grew up in a church where when she went with her family, it was normal for people to have their hands up in the air. It was normal for people to be excited in worship. It was normal to even hear somebody maybe down the row speaking in tongues and expressing themselves that way. And this was just something that she thought was normal at church. And then she marries this Christian man, and kind of a little bit naive, she assumes that that's what church is like everywhere. And so she marries this guy. And she starts to go to his church. And very quickly she realizes that church can be a very different experience in different places, because as she starts to go to her husband's church, it's different. Not only are they not doing some of the things that her old church was doing, but they're uncomfortable with it. They're not doing it, they're intentionally not doing it, and they're shying away from it. And as they shy away from it, sometimes they even talk about how churches that do those things, like the one she comes from, is wrong. And so she's asking for help. She's asking for people to try to make sense of this. How can two people have such different experiences when they're in the same environment? Because her husband isn't experiencing this at all. To him, Christ is alive. He's pumped up about what's happening in his church. I think it's kind of interesting how two people can sit in the same room at the same time and have two totally different experiences of what's going on in front of them. This happens with my sister and I sometimes after coming out of a church service. We'll both be excited, and we'll start having a conversation about what just happened, and Melanie will be like, "Man, that was good. It was just so true. I feel like I have recalibrated in my mind what truth is. Like I just feel like I have a more full picture of what Jesus is looking like for me. I feel like I understand truth better." And I'll be like, "Okay, Mel, tell me what like the preacher said that, really stood out to you. Tell me what made that shift in your thinking. She goes, yeah, I don't know what he said. It just felt true. There's just there's just the Spirit of Jesus coming out of his mouth. And it just impacted my heart. And I'm like, she'll be like, And I'm like, no, I don't know. And then I'll go off on this tangent and I'll be like, but you know what? I loved how he connected that thing to that thing. I've really been researching that in the scripture for myself. And I'll go off on this tangent and I'll spend 10 minutes explaining history and all of these different theological concepts and how the preacher that morning tied it all together. And I'm like, wow, Jesus is alive. Like, this is crazy, She'll go, yeah, I don't know, but I know I felt like it was true. So it was. And we sit in this exact same service, yet we have two totally different experiences, but we come to the same conclusion that there was truth there and that somehow the Spirit of Jesus was connected to that truth. But it is interesting how we can have such different experiences, which is why I think that the beginning of this story is really interesting, because it says Jesus walks up this mountain, and then as he walks up this mountain, suddenly he's talking to these two different men. And the two different men that he's talking to is Moses and Elijah, which represent two really different ways of experiencing God. These men have had very different encounters with him. On one hand, you have Moses, who represents the law. He's more intellectual. He's about, we need to do things right. And he would study the scriptures. People under Moses, they knew the Bible like the back of their hand. They had it figured out. They knew exactly what they were supposed to do and what they weren't supposed to do. And Moses would probably say something to you along the lines of like, okay, well, if you live by the principles of God, you're going to open yourself up to experiencing him. And if you don't, you can't ask why you're not experiencing God. And then you have Elijah, who is more like the experiential. He's having divine revelations. He's hearing God in the moment and then telling people what God is saying. And he's like a voice of God for people, and he's experiencing him in the moment. And he is more of like the experiential side of things. And so you have these two very different things, these two very different ways of experiencing God. So I'm going to tell a story of what I think it might be like if Moses and Elijah had to find a church together today. And I want you to try to imagine which one you are more like. Are you more like Moses, or are you more like Elijah? So it's 2016. Moses and Elijah pop up. We stick them inside of a car, and they have to go find a church together. I think this is kind of what would happen. So they get in the car, and they show up to a church. They walk through the doors, they grab a cup of coffee, and they sit through the whole service and experience it. And they come out, and Moses is just fired up. He's just pumped up. He's like, it's been over 1,000 years, and they still holding true to the scriptures. Did you hear that preacher talk? His exegesis was bang on, and he clearly used a good use of hermeneutics. He had it figured out. Man, he had that sermon down, and it was so applicable. I know exactly the principle that I'm going to apply to my life now this week because of what he said. And Moses is just fired up. He's just pumped up. He's like, man. And then sheepishly on the other side of the car, Elijah's like, yeah, but didn't it seem kind of dead to you in there? Like, I felt like no one was really experiencing God. Like, I couldn't seem to cultivate the presence of God. And I mean, we only sang 2 or 3 songs. There wasn't enough time for me to get into it, Or, yeah, but didn't it seem kind of old-fashioned to you? I mean, it just seemed kind of like some principles that we should live by. It seemed like they're kind of missing like the relational component of God, like hearing him right now. And that sick guy, not one person prayed for him. I think they're missing part of who God is. So Moses is fired up. Elijah's kind of like, yeah, but what about this? What about that? So Moses agrees they're going to go to a different church next Sunday. They'll try another one. And so they go to another church the next Sunday. And this time when they come out, Elijah's pumped up. He's like, there we go. That's a church that's alive. That's what this is about. Man, the worship. Oh, let me tell you, the worship. Yeah, I just felt so alive. Like you could just feel there was like a thickness of presence in the room. And I had like at least 2 or 3 people come up to me and just totally know what was going on in my life, and they could speak so much truth to me. And I think I saw like at least one person get healed in front of me. And Elijah's just like pumped up about what's happening. And Moses, on the other hand, doesn't know if he should say anything, but he kind of goes, yeah, but, we were there for a long time. And in the length of it, there wasn't a whole lot of Bible mentioned. And when it was, I'm not sure that's what that text means. I'm not sure they did that right. I think he might have read into that a little bit more than he should have. I'm not sure about that. And I want to be a part of a church that I can get involved in, and I didn't see clearly what they pragmatically do to help the city. Are they feeding the poor? I don't even know if they're doing that. They know God is just, right? They know that. I just wasn't getting a sense of that. I feel like they're missing out on a part of who God is. And so you have these two guys who experience God very differently. They have different experiences when they go to these same places. And it ends with, yeah, but what about that? Yeah, but what about that? And I think in our communities and in our own heads, we can often turn into yeah, but Christians, because there's things happening around us and we don't know quite how to make sense of them, and we go, okay, well, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about that? And that's exactly what these guys are doing. So traditionally, what happens is eventually there's too many yeah buts and there's too many conversations that the Elijahs, they go and they build a church over here, and they do things that are comfortable for them here. And they have their really long services and they worship, and it's more about connecting and having relationship and feeling the presence of God. And the Moseses, they come and they build their churches over here, and they're all about, we got to make sure we're following the Word of God. We're going to really make sure we're having an impact on our community, and they build their church and they do things the way that are comfortable for them. And every time it gets questioned from the other side, they go, yeah, but what about this? What about this? I think you're missing this. Before we go further, I would like to say that I absolutely adore PAC because PAC is a really unique place, as we have both groups of people pretty intensely on both sides, and we find a way to work it out together. I mean, even at House Church Plus a few weeks ago, Nathan asks the question, what does PAC need to do to take the next step? And you have one person stick up their hand and says, we need to have a plan. We need to really put together a plan. And then another person sticks up their hand and says, we need to worship. And that's how these things that we want to have come together are going to happen. And I love that we're a church where both of those things are happening at the same time, because it gives us freedom to be who we've been created to be. But here's the danger. The danger is when we fall too far into one camp and we become too much of a yeah, but Christian. Because what happens when we start saying yeah, but a bit too much is we start missing out on the fuller picture of who Jesus really is. And I think this happens when Jesus looks a little bit different than maybe what we thought he was supposed to look like, which is exactly what happens in this Transfiguration story. They know Jesus looks like this. Then all of a sudden, Peter and the disciples wake up, and Jesus looks different than maybe what they thought he looked like. All of a sudden, Jesus is bigger. All of a sudden, Jesus is more mysterious, and God has way more wonder than they initially thought. And they have to decide what to do with that. And so in this, Peter does probably what most of us do. Peter goes right back to doing what Peter knows how to do, and there's a festival at this time of the year, so it's actually not that weird that Peter wants to build these shelters and hold on to this moment. But that's what he's doing. He's trying to hold on to something, when maybe Peter, what he needs to do is let go of something. Because in this moment, Peter says, let's build a shelter. Let's build one for Jesus, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And instead of fully embracing this new thing that's right in front of him, which is what the three of them are talking about, Jesus, Moses, and Elijah, they're talking about Jesus' exodus. And if the writer wants us to have this idea in our head that in Jesus, there's going to be this new thing, and it's going to be different than what Elijah looks like, and it's going to be different than what Moses looks like. And yet, in this revelation of Jesus looking a little bit different, Peter tries to hold on to all three at the same time. And this is what we do. We try to hold on to what's comfortable. We try to hold on to old things that maybe we actually need to let go of. Because I think both Moses's and Elijah's, when we do this, the result is not only do we miss out on the fuller picture of Jesus, but we begin to experience doubt. And I think Moses's and Elijah's experience doubt for different reasons. But it both comes out of this new picture of who Jesus is. The Moses's, all of a sudden a new idea gets put into their head, or somebody suggests that maybe the Bible, when it says that, it's actually talking about this, not that. Or they see some things happening in church and they're just not quite sure how to fit that into what they understand and what they believe. And so this new idea gets presented to them, and all of a sudden they have to try to fit together this new thing, this new idea into what they already believe. And they have a hard time doing it. Sometimes it's hard to fit it in, and so they move into a season of doubt. And I think it's interesting that as Peter says, let's hold on to this thing, a cloud comes. And what happens when the cloud moves in? There's not more clarity. All of a sudden, Peter becomes afraid. And so Peter very quickly transitions into fear, doubt, confusion, not exactly sure what to do with this thing that's happening in front of him. And so I think Moses has experienced doubt when there's new ideas, when there's new things that are going on that people are experiencing and they don't know what to do with it. And they're having a hard time fitting the pieces together. Now, Elijah's, I think something very different happens for them, but it still has to do with this new experience that they have with Jesus. You know, Peter says, this is a wonderful thing that we're experiencing this with you, Jesus. And then all of a sudden the cloud comes, and all of a sudden this experience, this thing that he was experiencing, isn't there anymore. And there's the season that we can walk through, I think, as Elijah's, where it feels like every step we're taking, the presence of God is there. It's like he's always there, and we're having pictures and dreams and revelations, and we're seeing God work through us in new ways. And then as this new revelation becomes familiar, or as it's not happening and you can't experience the presence in the same way maybe you were a season ago, you begin to shift into doubt as it feels like maybe I'm missing something. And you start to ask the question, what am I missing? I feel like there's something that I need to be experiencing. I feel like some people are having success in that area, and I'm not having the same success as them, so I must be missing something. And so we try to cultivate experience. Now here's what I'd like to suggest. As we move through seasons of doubt, I think this is where we need to learn from each other, both Moses's and Elijah's. Because part of holding on to the old is that we try to move through doubt in a way that's comfortable. So what does a Moses do when they experience doubt? They do a study on sanctification or atonement. They go to the Bible and they start studying it and they go, okay, does this fit? Is this right? Is it right for people to be doing that here? Or is it not right? And they go to the book and they try to figure out if it's right or not. Is it okay for people to be experiencing that? Is it right or not? Is what he said right or not? And as these new ideas come, they study and they try to figure it out. And it's comfortable. It's easy to live there for a Moses. And the Elijahs, they spend more time soaking. They worship differently or longer. They try praying differently. They try to cultivate an environment where they can experience God or recultivate the presence that maybe they were experiencing a little while ago and want to bring it back. And so they move into what's comfortable for them. Now here's what I'd like to suggest, is that as we move through seasons of doubt, what we need to do is instead of doing what's comfortable is actually enter into what's uncomfortable and open ourselves up and start spreading our wings a bit. And if you're a Moses, maybe it would be super uncomfortable for you, but maybe on a worship experience on a Sunday morning, instead of sitting there and going, well, I can't wait till the sermon starts, you put your hands up in the air and you go, God, I'm open to you. And it's going to be really weird. But if you're in a season of doubt, I think that's maybe where you start. Or maybe you go to somebody who you know is more hardwired like an Elijah than you, and you ask them to to pray for you, or you ask them how they experience God, and you press into what they're doing. And if you're an Elijah and you're going through a season of doubt, maybe it's not that you need to spend more time in worship or soaking, but maybe you need to go to somebody who's more hardwired like a Moses and get them to explain sanctification to you and why it's so important. Get them to explain atonement. Get them to explain why that piece of text just fires them up, why they're so excited about that chapter, or why they're so excited about the book of Hebrews. And they won't stop talking about the book of Hebrews. Go figure out with them why they're talking about the book of Hebrews. And it might be uncomfortable, and it might not be how you're hardwired, but I think as we open ourselves up to experiencing God in new ways, whatever that looks like for you, what happens is we can move out of being a yeah, but Christian. See, now it's no longer my version of Christianity versus yours, and I'm experiencing the true version of Christianity, and you need to wake up, right? The church needs to wake up. Instead, what it does is it allows us to learn from each other and to celebrate our diversity. Because here's what I love. In the midst of the confusion, in the midst of the doubt, in the midst of the fear that Peter is experiencing in this moment, all of a sudden a voice cracks through and says, "This is my chosen one. This is my son. Listen to him." And I think this is my favorite part of this entire story. My favorite verse in this entire Transfiguration story says, "And after the cloud, there was Jesus alone." There was Jesus alone. You had Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, and now Jesus is alone. And there's only Jesus. And it's as if the writer is saying, in a weird way, Moses and Elijah become infused inside of Christ, inside of Jesus. And he is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. He's the fulfillment of it all. And so he's both and neither at the same time. Jesus is the one that the voice says to hang on to, which means we're going to have to open ourselves up. It means we're going to have to follow Jesus down the mountain. Because what Jesus does for us is he infuses the two and helps us see that mature believers with him can move from, yeah, what about that? Or yeah, what about that? To hold things in tension and go, yeah, both. Yeah, both. Jesus helps us move from being yeah, but Christians to yeah, both. Both of these things can exist. Both of them can exist in tension. And as we learn to learn from each other, and as we celebrate our diversity, the ways that we experience God differently, instead of saying yeah, but to each other, as we enter into the different ways that we experience God together, we're going to have a fuller, deeper revelation of God. We're going to have a clearer picture of what this Jesus really looks like. And that's exciting. Because we learn that Jesus is more mysterious. God is way bigger than our own little views of who he is. And it means that we don't have to live in these seasons of doubt for very long. But instead, what can happen as we open ourselves up to the different things happening around us, we can begin to have our faith come alive in new ways, in ways that we never thought it might. So the band's going to come up. We're going to play a song. And as we sing this song and move through communion, I want you to open yourself up and go, Jesus, I'm open to whatever you have for me. And I will surrender my own way of doing things. And instead, I'm going to choose to move into a yeah, both Christian. And then together as a community, we're going to do probably the best thing we can do right now, which is celebrate our diversity, because communion in itself is a yeah, both thing. And I'm going to explain that together, and then we're going to celebrate this Jesus that we're all following together. Man, I love that communion fell on this Sunday, because there's no better way for us to celebrate our diversity and who we are and celebrate our union together than this. Because for some people, this is an incredible experience. And it's like they're tasting God. He's like, it's right here. And for some, This is a beautiful symbol of atonement and sanctification and the hope of eternal life. And we all experience this differently, yet we're all here together taking the same thing. We're all here together taking in Christ. And that's a beautiful picture of what the church looks like. That's a beautiful picture of what Jesus looks like. And so let's celebrate our diversity together and open ourselves up to Christ by doing this. He said, "This is my body broken for you." And my blood poured out for you. You guys can take a seat for a few minutes. Now, as disciples, as people that follow Christ, when Christ stands in front of us and he's bigger than we thought he was, God's bigger than we thought he was, and maybe he's not exactly like we thought he was, and we have an experience like what the disciples did in this story, we are faced with a really important choice, and that choice is, who are you going to follow down the mountain? Are you going to follow Moses down the mountain? Are you going to follow Elijah down the mountain? Or are you going to follow Jesus down the mountain? And it's a really significant choice, because if you choose Moses or Elijah, here's how you know that you've done that. You walk out of here this morning and you go, yeah, but and you know that you've decided to follow Jesus down the mountain when you go, I don't necessarily understand it all, but I'm going to choose to go, yeah, both. And you walk out of here and you feel more alive than you have before, because all of a sudden Christ, Jesus, is bigger. And all of a sudden there's a little bit of mystery. And all of a sudden this Jesus guy becomes really exciting. And here's what I promise for you. The promises of the Bible is, as you enter into Christ, as you embrace the full revelation of who he is, and you open yourself up to him, there's some incredible benefits and reward for following Christ. You can live a life of peace, purpose. You can live a life where your relationships are full and satisfying. But it's going to require us together to celebrate our diversity and hold things in tension and learn from one another. So here's my prayer for us as a church, because I think we're already really good at this. I just want to say that one more time. As a church, we're really good at this. So it is a prayer, but it's more of a continuation. I pray that we would continue. But for you, I pray that you would be somebody that, as you open yourself up to who Jesus is, that you would experience the fullness of who he is, and not just a limited perspective of him. I pray that you would be somebody that, instead of being skeptical of those around you, you could be open to them and open to learning from those around you. I pray as you enter into things that are uncomfortable for you and you press into whichever camp that's more uncomfortable for you, that your heart would become more alive, that your faith would become more alive than ever. And mostly, I pray that you would be a believer who doesn't say, yeah, but that you would be a believer, that you would be a follower, that at the end of the day, you can say, yeah, both. So here's the deal. There's going to be a prayer team that comes forward, and they're going to be willing to pray for you. Maybe you need to do this. Maybe if the thought of coming forward and getting prayer from somebody is extremely uncomfortable for you, maybe you should try it. Otherwise, I hope you guys have an amazing week. and I hope you're able to press into the yeah, both. Bless you guys a lot.